let's get to it then. Pull this prompt up. Don't even have it pulled up myself. All right. So short essay number 2. Due next Friday, the 23rd of July, at 11:59 p.m. Friday going into Saturday, next Friday, which is about 10 days from now. That's when this thing's due. You got plenty of time. I figured since I'd cut the third paper out, I'd just give you plenty of time to do this one. Okay, that's kind of my thinking. So same song and dance we've done with short paper 1 in the midterm. 3 to 4 double-spaced pages, thereabouts. Follow MLA format. So you format your paper the same exact way you have been doing in the previous assignments. Double space margins, Times New Roman 12 font, cite by page number in the text. I made sure to correct my mishap from the first prompt there. So you cite by the page number in the text. No need for a title page. Proofread your papers scrupulously. And all of that good stuff. The template is on. If you haven't been formatting your paper right, the template's up on Blackboard for your benefit. Which I don't recall telling anybody you're not formatting your paper right last time. So your questions, I've given you guys a pretty wide range to pick from here. I'll talk you through each one. You guys can, some light bulbs might start going off. This is up for you on Blackboard too, by the way. I just uploaded it right before class. And we're going to read one of our Friday reading, the Friday reading coming up for this week's called a short story called The Grayling by a Southern writer named William Gilmore Simms. So when I say Simms in this question, I'm including him into this. I say discuss how any of our Gothic writers, Irving, Simms, Poe, or Hawthorne, developed dramatic tension in any of their stories through any literary conventions or themes we've discussed. I say so, for instance, you could relate Simms to the themes of the Enlightenment. The whole idea that we talked about with the Enlightenment before, about how they rejected the mysticism of the Puritan age. Well, Simms kind of plays on that in that story, as you guys will see when you read it Friday. I say, or perhaps Hawthorne and the Puritan origins theory of American literature, or Washington Irving with the wilderness. We've talked about a lot of themes in this class, right? I'm pretty much just saying match an author with a theme. That's pretty much all that question is, right? Plenty of room for creativity with this question. But this is mostly about our fiction writers here. So Irving, Simms, Poe, and Hawthorne. Just think, up until last week, we had mostly read nonfiction. Right? We had read all the history stuff at the beginning of class, read the Enlightenment stuff, the autobiography of Franklin. We read Emerson, we read Thoreau, we read Douglas. Well, now's a chance to kind of relate these stories, these fictional stories, to some of these other things we've discussed through the course. That's pretty much what question 1 does. Lots of room for you to do your own thing with that question. Question 2. I thought of you when I wrote this question, Danny. This was what you had written about before.
Yeah, I think I've already picked mine out. I believe.
Yeah, it's Frederick Douglass, a transcendentalist. To answer the question, you'll need to refer to Emerson or Thoreau's writing and find what it means to be a transcendentalist. Then, depending on your argument, you'll want to provide plenty of textual support from Douglass's narrative or his 4th of July speech to prove your stance. So, do you think he's a transcendentalist or not? If so, how? If not, why? Right? You can make the argument either way, I think. Some people say that he's the one true transcendentalist, right? The one that wasn't just theory, but he actually lived it. Some people argue that. I've read papers both ways on this before, so lots of room for argument here. Either way, and make sure you always incorporate your analysis within the text, right? So if you say that he's a transcendentalist, and give parts of his autobiography to prove why. Okay. Number 3, I'm interested. I'll definitely be interested. This is kind of a diversity question. So, does Whitman's Song of Myself do a comprehensive job in showcasing the American people and all its diversity? Is it possible for Whitman, a white dude, to emphasize with all people and their unique struggles? To do this question, focus on some passages from Song of Myself where Whitman discusses the great variety of American people. All right, so if you go and read a lot of scholarship about Walt Whitman, some critics, especially critics of color and things like that, right? They kind of take exception to Whitman. Like, how's this old creepy dude with the beard, right? How what does he know about being black in America, all right? So you guys know that was his project. He wanted to be the Pope of all people in America. But was that possible? Right? Is that possible? Does he pull it off in your opinion? I tend to be of the opinion that I think he pulled it off. Right? That's my gut hunch. Right? He covered people of different. He covered Native Americans, African American slaves. He covers different sexualities besides being straight, right? Which was very taboo for the time. Right? So that's just my opinion. If you guys disagree, express it. Give me a good argument. Just never think you got to agree with me. Right? I do want to say that. Like, I can completely disagree with you. If you give it a good argument, I'll be impressed. Okay. I know. That would be a good question for you, Sydney. I remember you were not a Whitman fan a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I was thinking about it actually.
You were the one talking about how he creepily skulks through the bushes.
Yeah.
So this next question is about horror writing, especially since that's kind of like what we've been doing over the past week or two. With the Scarlet Letter, I would classify as a horror story in many ways. But if you guys remember from last week, Edgar Allan Poe's stories take place through the first person narrator, right? The first person narrator who's slowly might not even be descending into madness, right? Maybe the narrator's already mad from the start. So I ask you here, what do you think is more effective at scaring or at least alarming readers? The first person perspective of Poe or the third person perspective of Irving or Hawthorne? provide some passages where you point out the effectiveness of one point of view over the other. So Hawthorne's exhibits a third person point of view, right? His narrator completely kind of takes over the story of the Scarlet Letter. Right? His narrator is this all-knowing person, right? Who can tell the story. Right? He knows all the motivations and the secrets of all these characters that we have: Dimmesdale and Chillingworth and Hester. The narrator knows all their secrets, right? The narrator tells you the story. Whereas in Poe, right, you get the story, but it's filtered through the eyes of a crazy person. I mean, so what do you think is a more effective way of telling a good sort of Gothic story? That's kind of which this is very much a matter of taste. Right? You prefer the way Poe does it, you prefer the way that Hawthorne or Irving does it in Sleepy Hollow. So whichever way you do, if you maybe argue for third person, you could talk about Irving or Hawthorne there. But if you talk about first person, you got to talk about Poe, because he's the only writer we've read that does that, at least in this class. He helped innovate that. Other writers would do that a lot later. If you take American Lit 2, you'll read a lot of stories with a first person narrator. Poe's the one who helped kind of innovate that. Question 5 and 6. These are discussion questions we can even use for today in our discussion of the Scarlet Letter. But why is the Scarlet Letter on Hester's clothing such a powerful symbol? Why, even if the symbol would be removed, would Hester still have it emblazoned upon her? How does the symbol tie the entire novel together with themes like hidden sins being buried deep within the heart? All right, so Hawthorne is very, he kind of hits you over the head with his symbol here a lot in this book, right? It's not a symbol that he's just putting out there and letting you think what you want, right? He kind of hits you over the head with his like moral take on like what he thinks the symbol does, like what it does to Hester's soul, right? Her consciousness.
And it kind of changes meaning, it seems, over the course of the story.
Right?
I feel like it does, yeah.
Yeah, like especially with like how Pearl kind of keeps like Pearl in a way helps change the meaning of it. With like the way that she always like wants to play with the symbol. Of course, we know at the end, Dimmesdale's kind of got a symbol of some kind upon his heart when he dies at the end. So I'm eager to discuss this question with you guys today. And this will be a good one. Number 6 will be something that I will talk a lot about today because I've done a lot of writing on this subject. But Roger Chillingworth's character, he's our antagonist in the story. Today, I'm going to ask you guys the question: what's actually that bad about Chillingworth? Right? What do he actually do that's that bad? Right. So, what is chilling about Chillingworth? So you guys can kind of see what Hawthorne was doing with the way he names characters, right? Dimmesdale, right? Dimmesdale's kind of dim, right? So you guys can kind of see that he plays with names in that way to kind of show character traits. So my question here is he a bad physician in his treatment of Dimmesdale? Characterize Chillingworth and fully interrogate the problem of his ethics in the novel. Bridget, I kind of thought of you for this question. As a future medical practitioner yourself, this kind of reminds me of our 102 class we had a year or two ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'll definitely be eager to hear your thoughts on this question today in class, even as we discuss the book. So, I like to think there's a little something for everybody here. So, so far, I've been very pleased. Not many of you do the same subject. Like I've gotten lots of variety in my topics so far. The midterm was the one where I got the most repetition. A lot of you guys wrote about credit core in the midterm. I trust that this one I'll have lots of variety. Questions, comments, concerns, anything I can answer about this this prompt? All the questions make sense? Can I clarify any of the questions?
Go back up to number 1 if you don't care.
Okay.
Okay, you want us to only discuss one author?
Yeah, match. I pretty much say here, match an author with a theme.
Okay.
So I'll just give some examples here. So it can be like Hawthorne with the way that Puritans treated people in America, right? Or Irving and how he plays on the wilderness, right? Like,
I just wanted to make sure.
yeah, you don't have to do either of those. All I'm saying is match an author with a theme and kind of run with it.
On number 4 with the POV part of it, do you want us to do like quotes from both authors, like a Poe and a Hawthorne or what have you?
Yeah, so think
Okay.
about it like let's say you argue the first person's more effective, right? You would first kind of show in your argument why you think the first person's more effective. But then maybe later in your paper, for instance, you could then address the third person. You can then say, hey, here's why I think the third person's less effective than the first. You see where I'm going there?
Yeah, because considering I talked about it last week, I do believe that's the one I'm going with.
Right. Yeah.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I remember you talked a lot about Poe in first person last week. I'll be even eager to hear your thoughts today on that, Lisa, about Hawthorne. What you think about his narrator style compared to Poe.
Okay.
Anything else here I can address? Like I said, I tried to give you a little bit of everything. Intellectual inquiry is a good thing, right? I think there's a little something for everybody here. If there's something on here that you feel compelled to write about that I didn't put, just talk to me about it, right? I'm open to even like letting you guys develop your own research question if you want. These are just ones that my mind kind of hones in on. And if you hone in on an idea, let me know. I'll be happy to let you elaborate on it. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to move locations. I had to kind of charge my laptop at the last minute here. So I'm going to move to my desk. Hold on just a second. All right, then. So let's talk about Hawthorne then. So Nathaniel Hawthorne is, along with Poe, one of our greatest American fiction writers, especially so the early 1800s. Right, he's still widely read a lot today. He's never not been a popular writer. Well, I make an exception to that. When he was alive, he didn't sell that many books. But after his death, he died right before the Civil War started. And after his death, especially in the 1870s, 1880s, a lot of readers kind of took a liking to him and thought that his stuff was brilliant. And he's never kind of fallen out of favor since. He's been a popular staple in American literature. He's one of our most treasured writers in American fiction. I've written a lot of stuff about him myself. I wouldn't say he's one of my favorites. Like, I don't read this guy for fun, right? But I do think he's really interesting. With his style and his innovations and things of that nature. I'm mostly interested in him because of his medical characters that he has. Like, he was obsessed with this idea of medical ethics and things of this nature. I'll go more in depth about that as we go. But he's a very well-known short story writer as well. He wrote, just to give you guys a few titles of some of the short stories, he wrote a short story called Rappaccini's Daughter, which is really famous. He wrote a story called The Birthmark, which is really famous. Young Goodman Brown is another one that's really famous. But there's a lot of Hawthorne in our textbook. Minister's Black Veil is another famous one. That's on page 368 of our book. If you guys are ever interested, check that one out. It's about kind of the same kind of stuff we're doing this week with the Puritans. It's about this minister who wears this like creepy black veil on his face, and like everybody in town gets creeped out about why, right? And they kind of like tar and feather him out of town. It's a really interesting story.
I thought about Rappaccini's Daughter when I was reading Scarlet Letter, when he talked about going to that grave and those black plants growing from that man's heart.
Right.
And those, because, Rappaccini's, he grew his own garden of herbs that he would use for his medicine. And there was the one point that made me think of Rappaccini's Daughter.
Right. He says that it sprang out of his heart, out of the sins within his heart, right? Just like how very similar idea there to that story.
Mm-hmm.
I remember we read that one and The Birthmark in our other class. We might have read another one. We read the Haunted Quack. I remember that was another one we read.
I like The Birthmark too.
You like the Birthmark as well?
Yeah, I like him though. I like all of his stories that I've read. I thought they've been pretty good ones.
Yeah, I mean,
they have a point to them. I mean, makes you you question things,
Right. I think that's a very good thing to say about him, right? All of his stories have some type of moral or lesson you take away from them, right?
Right. A lesson, right.
Yeah, his writing is kind of didactic in that way. That's the literature term for like a story that teaches you a lesson. It's a didactic story. Didactic, didactic. It might be that might be a key term that comes up later, by the way. But
okay, I'm writing it down.
A didactic story. A story with like a moral or lesson or a parable. It's almost like a parable, like one of Christ's parables. Right? It's definitely the Scarlet Letter, I would say for sure, is definitely a story meant to teach us a lesson of some sorts. What that lesson is, we can figure out for ourselves.
Right.
But just a little bit about the man himself. He went through this along with Poe, he helped innovate the American short story. You guys don't get any instances of that today. Bridget's read some before, but along with Poe, we owe Hawthorne a lot for innovating the American short story. But some of those stories we mentioned already. But he's also, he wrote mostly short stories early in his career. Around the 1850s is when he started writing novels. So the Scarlet Letter was actually his first novel. He wrote another one that's really famous called The House of the Seven Gables. And several other, I think he wrote 3 or 4 novels, something like that. I'm just looking through the Blithedale Romance is another one that's really good.
What's that one about?
It's got a lot of
That
that one's about like this it's almost like a utopian society kind of gone wrong kind of story. It's been a while since I've read it, but that's what I mostly remember. So yeah, he wrote novels.
I need to look that up.
Or go ahead, Bridget.
No, that's okay. I was gonna say I was writing that down because I really need to look those up.
Yeah, he wrote novels in the last decade of his life in the 1850s. I was wrong. He died in 1864, not before the war. He died during the middle of the war. He actually had a really awful death. He went to like the Bahamas, and how was it that I know he went to the Bahamas. He caught something bad. Yeah, he got really sick from, I forget what from, but he had a really awful death, if I remember right.
I wrote on it. I can't remember it. Let's see.
So his wife Sophia Hawthorne was definitely helped with his creativity. Right, she helped give him lots of ideas. The main thing to note about Hawthorne was he tied his genealogy back to the Puritans. He lived in Boston. He tied his genealogy back to these Puritans. Like during the witch trials, one of his ancestors was one of the main people who helped, sort of throw these witches to the fire, so to speak, or so-called witches. So Hawthorne felt guilty about that. Right? He kind of looked on the sins of his ancestors, right, and thought, "Oh man, these are my ancestors, right? I'm kind of ashamed of it." So a lot of his fiction has, like Bridget said, has this didactic purpose. It's a moral history. Right? He wants to kind of go. His fiction is for the most part historical fiction. He goes back to the past, and writes historical fiction about the past, and it always has some type of like moral lesson or tale or parable to it. But it's pretty easy. I think it's pretty easy to tell here, right, that he has. He doesn't paint the Puritans in a nice light in this story, to say the least. And a lot of that's because of his own shame at his own family taking part in it. I mean, I'm sure that's something all of you guys could probably imagine. Like, imagine if your ancestor did something horrendous like that, right? You would probably be a little bit ashamed of it yourself. So The Minister's Black Veil, like I said, it's a great short story that does the similar type of project as here. So I'll just now open the floor to you guys. What was your reading experience like with Hawthorne? Have you encountered him before? I remember when I was in high school, we read some Hawthorne at Wyoming East. I remember we read Young Goodman Brown, I remember. I have a weird memory about stuff like this. I don't know why. Like I can remember this stuff, but I don't remember where I put my car keys. Right. So I'm weird in that way. Right. But like, what was your reading experience like with Hawthorne? First time? Did you find him challenging or rewarding, or did you find him a drag? Right? What was your reading experiences like with it, with this novel?
I enjoyed the story eventually. But I told Tasha, I said it kind of felt to me like he just opened a thesaurus and just put all the words in there. Like it was really wordy and it was a lot, but I did enjoy the story. I felt really sorry for Hester. Like, and especially the little girl, because everybody always wanted to treat her kind of like she was either feral or a demon and stuff like that. And it was just literally nobody would talk to her. And you don't get social skills if you're never spoken to.
Right.
And I felt sorry for the little girl. Like, it, number one, I don't think she should have ever had to wear the A. And number two, the little girl should have never been punished because of it. But I got mad a few times, but it was a good story.
I feel like his stories never have a happy ending, though. The ones that I've read. I do like them though, and I do like like you said, the moral of the stories and the lessons you walk away with. But it's never that happy ending. Like they got to run away together to another town and live happy ever after. They didn't get to do that. Like, you know what I'm saying?
I think it's a real world ending. Like, not everybody gets a happy ending. You know what I mean? So he's real about it.
The only thing happy about the ending was Pearl, because I felt like she finally, had that father figure, even though it was sad at the same time that he had died. But at the same time, I feel like it kind of released her from this demon. I mean, it just seemed like the way he was talking about her, it was like she was more human, I guess, after he had. What did he do? Kiss her on the forehead or something. Right. And then, it said Chillingworth, he died a year later, and he left Pearl his estate or something like that, his property. So I guess, it was good for her in a sense. I mean,
I thought Chillingworth was a good dude at first.
Yeah, I did too.
So you thought he was a good guy at first?
Yeah, I thought he was just standing up for her, like just trying to make the other dude feel bad for what he did. But
took it
that's not power control.
But I think she was more intuitive than people wanted to give her credit, because everybody was always talking about. He talked a lot about like she would look at you like she knew. And it talked about her like looking at her reflection a lot. And I think that she could see how much she looked like him, and she knew. And nobody else could figure it out, but that little girl knew.
Are you talking about how she looked like Dimsdale?
Yes.
Right.
I couldn't remember his name. I heard it 10,000 times, you know what I mean? But I couldn't remember it.
It seemed like she knew things, or had these hunches that other people couldn't figure out. But
little kids are perceptive like that, though, right? You can try to hide things from them, but they put two and two together more than not. That which Pearl, of course, does here. I don't know if any of y'all who have had kids want to comment on that, but I've always thought little kids at that age are more smart than people think they are.
They are, and when you work with them, like Tasha and I do, you just have, you think that you're everything, you look fine if you're having a bad day or something, and then a fifth grader's like, Miss Lisa, are you having a bad day because you're not smiling? And I mean, they just they look and observe more than we do. We're distracted by life, and they're just straightforward.
Right. She always noticed he had his hand on his heart. You know, they notice things.
Yeah, they pick up on things that adults don't, right? Which is interesting. Well, some of you guys haven't chimed in yet. Other general impressions of the novel before we dive into specifics.
I just had trouble with the words.
Yeah, I did too. I found myself like Googling a lot of the words because I
Mm.
didn't understand some of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of big words I've never even seen in there. I had to definitely keep a dictionary tabbed up.
Yeah,
so-
it was a really long story with a lot of unnecessary words is what I thought. I liked it. Like I told Lisa, I feel like these could have been told in 3 chapters. Like, we could have summed this up a lot faster.
Right. Even made it into a short story, maybe.
Yeah. I liked it. I didn't like the ending as well because I wish that they would have got their happy ending because of all the pain that, she went through having, I don't know if you really call it pain because she wore the Scarlet Letter, but she didn't let it, I don't think, define her. She's still overcome.
I like how she changed the meaning because it talks toward the end of it that people didn't look at that A as adulteress anymore. They looked at it as angel. Like she owned that A, but she made it her.
Right.
And they also said it meant to Abel at one point as well, where she was known for her sewing abilities. But yeah, she was the only person in the whole story that really faced up to her sins, I think, and just face it, didn't try to hide anything.
But she told her husband, I mean, she even said in there, she told him that she really didn't love him, so I don't know. It was sad to think that she was, I guess, yearning for love and found it where she could not really have it. You felt a pity for her. Even though what, she done, but you felt pity. Well, it wasn't just her, it was him too. But you felt a pity for her.
Yeah, you have to remember that back then, people, especially in marriages, people didn't often marry for love, right? They would marry because of money, oftentimes. Like a daughter up until the 18th or 19th century, especially in Europe, daughters were almost like a burden to the family. Like you didn't pass property down to them. Daughters didn't inherit property, right? So fathers would oftentimes try to marry their daughter off to a well-to-do man or something. And they even kind of had to sell the daughter off with a bunch of money or property that goes with it or something like that. That was the dowry. Right. So you didn't marry a woman just for love or looks or something like that back then. You married because it would be a good arrangement, oftentimes, even if you were a man. So it's pretty easy to see here where Hester and Chillingworth would have gotten married because of a reason like that, right? He was a well-to-do, respected apothecary, right? So it's kind of sad to think about, right? That so many marriages happen that way. A lot of marriages will still happen that way today, but it's just not as spelled out, I suppose. as it
That's
used
what I was going to say too. There is still customs that, use arranged marriages.
Mhm.
I just could not imagine that. I just could not. I know I'd get with somebody I couldn't stand.
Right.
Because you can't never stand anybody your mom and dad likes anyway. So it would be bad.
Yeah, imagine being said, "Hey, this is the person you're going to marry. Deal with it."
Mm-mm. I'd run away probably.
Yeah, there's still a lot of like, especially in like Saudi Arabia and countries like
Yeah.
that today. They still have systems like that in place.
And a lot of it's from their birth, isn't it?
Hmm.
It's like arranged at birth.
Mhm.
Wow, it would be interesting to do a research on it to see how many really turns out okay.
Well,
I guess
a lot of those countries don't end in divorce because
No.
divorce is hidden, right? So,
I guess they just learn to live with it.
Is it still like with some of those, like the father of the bride has to give the groom so much money to marry his daughter too? Does that still go on in those countries?
yeah.
I know a
in some
lot of in like the Romanian gypsy people, it's kind of reversed. The daughter, they negotiate like she has to have so many dresses and they have to give her so much gold and stuff like that. It's kind of a role reversal. I mean, they still get married scarily young, like 12, 13 years old. But it's a role reversal. Like they lavish the gifts upon the girl instead of like, please take her. Here's money. Take her. Situation. I think as parents, we've all at one point been kind of like, just somebody please take her. But I mean, at the end of the day, you don't really want nobody to take your baby like that.
No.
If you guys are familiar with like Victorian lit and stuff, Jane Austen is an author and who does a lot of with this kind of idea, right? If you guys probably know Pride and Prejudice, right? Pride and Prejudice is a novel about this subject, like daughters trying to find good matches and all this kind of stuff.
That is my favorite.
Is that you who said that, Bridget?
Yes, it's my favorite. Always has been since high school.
Yeah, I enjoy some Jane Austen, right? So they made a Pride and Prejudice and Zombies a few years ago. I haven't checked that out yet, but they
I
made
hadn't either, but I did watch the new Netflix series. I actually just watched it not long ago, and it was pretty good. Brought in a lot of different diverse thing cultures into it, to make it more modern. But it was good.
Netflix did a Pride and Prejudice show.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as far as the sympathy card for Hester, you guys can kind of already put yourself into sympathizing with her from the beginning, and she married this like ugly, like Cretan looking guy, like walking around, right? Right. So, but you have to remember too, like they were separated. Like she thought he was still in Europe, right? So, oftentimes in relationships, if you get separated from somebody, like things happen, right? Long distance is hard to work, especially in a prearranged marriage, right? So you kind of have to sympathize a little bit with Hester here, right? As far as like,
Right. They had no communication. Like he just said, "Oh, when I'll be there," but what'd she say? 3 years or So long of time had gone by, not even as a word from him.
Yeah, she didn't even know if he was alive or dead. Right. So that was a hard standard to match up to. But it depends how you read this character, I suppose. I feel sympathy to her, right? But like, I suppose a person could take the Chillingworth's side from the beginning here, right? Hey, this woman cheated on him, right? She had a kid with somebody else, right? Maybe he would feel. Maybe you can kind of go along with his ride here as far as his revenge that he wants to take, to get even or something. Eventually, it becomes weird and petty at some point here, right? When it goes over like years and years, where like he's slowly like trying to corrupt Dimsdale or something, right? That's when things start becoming a little weird.
Like he turns into a gremlin.
Yeah, exactly.
Pictured a gremlin.
Sydney, you said you thought Chillingworth was a decent guy at first, right? You're feeling sympathy for him at first. You want to talk about why?
Yeah, like I just thought like he got there and he knew the situation and maybe he felt sorry for her and was trying to maybe get her some justice. Then about halfway through it was just petty, like you said, and just kind of changed that way of thinking.
Right.
I felt like he was trying to just keep his own reputation. Like,
He was like didn't want to hurt his pride or ego that his wife cheated on him and had another man's baby,
right.
Right. Well, can you sympathize with him a little there, though? Right. Like, would you, in this kind of society, would you want that getting out? Right. I guess is a question we can ask.
It would be embarrassing, that's for sure.
Be embarrassing. And he did, but right, he changed his name. He said, from here on out, you'll know me by this new name. So don't ever address me by the old. So he was kind of like, I think at first he didn't, that's the only way he knew how to handle it. He, to save them both, I think at first. And then I think the more he thought about, the angrier he got and wanted to get revenge. But at first, I guess the news was so shocking to him. But then he knew he didn't marry her for love in the first place.
Okay, I guess I'm different because if it happened to me, I would be vindictive from the beginning. And I would just, whenever I spoke, if I was him, whenever I spoke to her and we talked it all out, I'd have went out that door and I'd have been like, I'm her husband. She cheated on me because because I can get petty. I can be petty and I would be as petty as they come.
You're like, no mercy.
No.
I was wrong.
You want to know what else she did?
The question,
that bastard child.
the question here, Lisa, is would you hang out with the other woman over a period of years to make her feel like shit about herself? Would you do that, like Chillingworth did?
Oh, no, I'd kill them both just from the beginning and just go and start a new life. I mean, he already came over from England. Just get on that boat and go back. How are they going to find you? There ain't no fingerprints.
What I was going to say, I know her. No, she wasn't. She wasn't the last 2 days in there.
Too.
I'm from the head of a holler. I got all kinds of places I could stash him.
But you have to understand, though, I see it 2 ways. She didn't even know if he was alive.
Right.
Like, how long was she supposed to wait to hear from him? Like,
Right.
really, Like, today we have phones and, mail and stuff like that, we can reach out somehow. But how long was she supposed to sit there and wait?
Yeah.
For a man that she didn't even love.
Right.
Although she
And
did make those vows and she knew what she was getting herself into, but still yet, I mean, he could have married her and been out doing God knows what over where he was.
Right.
Was she supposed to just sit there and whisk
he could
away?
have been dead for all, for all
Yeah.
she knew.
Now,
And he didn't think about her. She could have been dead.
Yeah.
I do say that, but to be honest, I would probably be like crying in the bed, and then Tasha would be up there and be like, girl, you ain't doing this.
We're getting him back.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure if he had the opportunity in Europe to, do his thing, I'm sure he did his thing out there.
Who's to say he didn't do his thing, and that's why he's over there for 3 years.
Right.
Well, didn't he say at some point he had sinned against her too? Or was that only just because he knew he married her without loving her?
I don't remember this.
I don't either.
I don't either.
It does say that he spent some period of time in Indian captivity. So he was like Mary Rowlandson for a while, right? He was like going around with the Indians and living life with the Indians for a long period of this time.
See, I didn't even really pay attention to the fact that he had been in England for quite a bit of time, because I was just assuming because he was dressed and with Indians when she was in the stocks that he'd just been out somewhere with them, and she just assumed he died while he was gone.
Right. I think he had come over to America, but then that's when he got kidnapped by Indians.
Oh, okay.
And like it was over a period of a long. But it's easy to infer that somebody might have died being kidnapped by Indians. Right? Knowing what we know about that process from earlier in the class.
The narrator does call him civilized and savage. What I think is what the narrator calls him. And I think he does kind of come off as, a little, cold. Or that was my initial thought while reading it.
Yeah, so since we're on this subject of Chillingworth, I can kind of give you guys a little bit of context here. I wrote about Chillingworth a lot of my doctorate project. But at this time period in Hawthorne's America, so we're in the 1800s. He was writing this in the 1850s. This was a time period in America where the medical profession started to deregulate itself. So before this, you had to have some type of medical degree to practice medicine. Right. Oftentimes in Jackson, sort of the antebellum period in America, if you were practicing medicine, the way you learned it was you most of the time you would learn it by just having another doctor teach you how to do it. Right, you would be an apprentice to another doctor, or lawyers learn the trade of law of being a lawyer the same way. You would be an apprentice. Well, they started schools up, but in the 1830s, 1840s, they decided that they would deregulate this. They thought that doctors were elitist. They thought that doctors acted like they knew more than anybody else. They acted like doctors didn't really care about their patients. Doctors were in it for themselves. They were in it for the money. They were in it for the profit. They didn't give a crap about their patients. So, and with this sort of attitude, all these different states started deregulating the medical profession. So slowly, anybody could claim to be a doctor all of a sudden. Right? So you had the traditional doctors. You had homeopaths. Right? Homeopaths were doctors who were who did like a lot of herbal cures, things like that, which is what Chillingworth does here, right? This is his thing. He treats people with herbs. He learns a lot of his trade through Indians. Right? He treats people with herbs. You had all kinds of other weird kinds of doctors in early 1800s America. You had mesmerists who would kind of like put people under a trance and like try to make them get better while they were under hypnosis. You had hydrotherapy. There was a branch of medicine called physiognomy, which was about like trying to understand a person's health through their facial features. All kinds of weird, crazy medical sects started springing up in this time period in America. So Chillingworth is an interesting character in this regard, right? Because colonial America, there obviously wasn't a lot of regulations. Like, there's like 3 or 4 doctors in all of America. The narrator tells us that, right? Some of them weren't really even doctors. At this time period in colonial America, barbers were the main people who gave medical care. If you guys ever wondered what the swirly thing is in front of the barber shop, have you guys ever wondered what that is?
That's because they used to work as doctors too, wasn't it?
Exactly, right. That swirly thing in front of a barber shop used to show that that's a doctor's office back in the colonial days. So that's what the swirly sign is in front of a barber shop. They were doctors in the colonial period. You have to imagine to yourself, what did they know about medicine? Right? Probably not much. But if you've ever wondered what that is, that's what that is. You knew that already, Lisa, before I started ranting about it?
Yeah, my husband swears that I have a head full of useless knowledge that's going to make us rich one day. That's just one of them useless knowledge things.
Right. You went through all of you have went through your whole lives at this point, not knowing what that meant. So can't say you haven't learned anything new today. Right. But yeah, so Chillingworth's this guy who knows something about herbs, right? So obviously he's gonna like become accepted within the community. So yeah, you kind of have to put yourself in that situation. This was right before the Civil War, and anybody could claim to be a doctor and practice medicine and establish some type of shop. It's a scary thought, and it's this. So something that I wrote about a lot was, if this story would have been written in like the 1880s or the 1890s, would it have had the same? Would Chillingworth's character have had the same sort of significance? Because by that period, the medical profession had kind of reestablished itself. You suddenly needed a degree to practice medicine. You had to be certified by the state again to practice medicine. If he would have written this, this book would have been written 50 years later, would this character be as scary? Right.
Right. That kind of goes back. What was the book that we had did before about where the guy was a dentist? And remember, he had practiced, and then they wanted to all of a sudden make a rule or law you had to have a degree or something other. Would you even would you trust going somewhere if the doctor, do we know? I mean, when we go to a doctor, we hope they went to college and got a degree. We don't know. They say they're a doctor, we go there.
Right. Yeah, the dentistry is another profession, right? That was like that up until the 1890s, as we learned about with that crazy book.
I guess in those times you just had to, even though you wasn't really sure, it's still the best option they had, as the only resort they could go to in some of these places.
Right. Chillingworth is almost this last resort option, right? Who else is going to practice medicine? He seems like a know-it-all, right? Compared to some of these other people practicing medicine in colonial America, like barbers. So, yeah, he would take this sort of prestige among the community, right? You could just act like you knew a lot, and you would be accepted back then. You could be a good actor and not know anything, and you could be a medical practitioner then. A little alarming to think about, right? Just a little bit.
But as I was reading it, I don't know. I know it said he was kind of smart, I guess, but I just had a feeling he was just a crap doctor. Just didn't really know a lot. I felt like
He
So-
talked a lot about like homeopathic and stuff like that, and which, because my family believed in this stuff, like the roots and herbs and things like that. Like, there's a lot of medicinal properties in that, and him hanging out with them Indians probably gave him a lot of knowledge. And I mean, he may have just called himself a doctor because, you know, that's what he wanted to be that Tuesday. And then he started hanging out with the Indians and learned how to make poultices and stuff and fix people.
How do you guys all feel about like alternative medicines and stuff even today? Are some of you guys more accepting of it? Like you seem to be so, Lisa. Or do you find that you think it's BS? Right?
Now, there's some of it that I think it's really proved itself to be like tried and true, like using herbs and things like that as balms or whatever. But now some of them would take it just a step too far. Like I can remember my brother was a very bad asthmatic growing up, and one of my dad's aunts wanted to take a wad of cobwebs and shove it down his throat, and it would cure him of that asthma. And my mom's like, "You ain't coming near my son, my baby," and shoving cobwebs down his throat. But she's like, "No, it'd work, and it might do it." But to me, that's just quack medicine. But now, like Indians, they could go out, they could tell you what herbs would fix what. Like you know what I mean? It's just that type of stuff. Yeah, I believe wholly in. But now there's quackery in some of it.
Yeah, I fall in the middle with that. I feel like today, you know, pharmaceutical companies and the doctors, it's all about money. So they'll give you things, and I think that some things can, you know, natural remedies can help and even, you know, have lesser side effects. But there's just no money in it. But you know, I think it. You know, modern medicine's good or better in some ways as well.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of times the cure is worse than the disease. Like my daughter has IBS issues, and the medicine that they wanted to put her on, one of the side effects was death. And I'm like, I mean, we'll just go without the medicine because, you know, her stomach cramping is better than her dead.
Yeah.
Look at antidepressants, all the side effects on them. I mean, suicidal thoughts and everything.
Yeah, instead, like if you go to a psychiatrist's office these days, right? That's the first thing they want to shove at you, right?
Yeah.
Instead of like trying to reach the root of the problem or something like that, right? They just want to give you some pill and call it over, right?
Yeah. Fix everything with the pill.
It's not what classic psychiatry is, right? Classic psychiatry is about actually getting to the root of your issues and not just covering it up with medications. Bridget, I remember
a lot of the problem anymore is they just want to throw a pill at it, and like, oh, they got ADHD, throw a pill at it, and they have autism, throw a pill at it. And I mean, there's there's tried and true alternative
Right.
treatments
You
that you can do for both of them that would help instead of drugging them up to the point of a zombie.
restrict their diet.
Right.
And the things that they eat and drink and consume, and that will change a lot of the behavior issues. But yes, that's what I want to do in life. So
Well, I remember even in technical writing, you did a project on homeopathy and stuff. So I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are.
but yes, I'm for that. Even today, and my house will tell you just a simple Vicks is the cure for everything. But I'm always Googling home remedies or looking at just old wives' tale, or even some of the Indian things. I didn't take the class, but even got like a book off of one of the girls that went to Southern. There is a class on even West Virginia medicine and things that they would got out of just air state as far as herbs and stuff to use to treat illnesses. So I really do believe in trying something before medication, some
Sure.
type of route.
There was a series of books that my dad used to have, and it was called Foxfire, Firefox. I think it was like 4 of them. But one whole book was about home remedies, poultices, and granny women. And it had like all these things in there that you could use to treat different things. And a lot of them worked. One of them was the cobweb thing. So, not all of it did, but
Some of it you find you don't even, like you said, you couldn't swallow cobwebs. And a lot of people, we're talking about this when you do that, they would think that's sort of like a thing of witchery. When you see people doing stuff like that, they would say you was a witch or something.
I wonder if that's the reason why the sister, was it Chillingworth's sister? They called her a witch and stuff like that, but she was really just like a homeopathic woman.
That was the governor's sister, I think.
Yes, him.
Yeah.
But they called her a witch throughout the thing, but really it was just she knew how to do homeopathic medicine, and they just didn't understand it or didn't want to understand it.
The question
Who probably kind of woman.
I didn't really understand her point in the story.
What, the witch character?
The Hibbins lady, yeah.
Yeah. Well, pretty close to the end, Hawthorne throws a wrench. He's like, yeah, they killed this woman for being a witch. She seems kind of like mentally ill or something like that, right? Yeah, but pretty close to the end, he kind of like drops a bombshell. Like, oh yeah, they really killed her for being a witch.
Yeah, she did kind of seem random in there. I thought it was interesting. But yes, it did seem like the witches and stuff, and talk about the black man in the woods, which I know was the devil or anything. But anything that was like witch related was like more nature, had more nature to it. It seemed that and nothing really seemed like bad about it. I don't think.
Isn't there something that, and this is off subject, but like going to the witch doctor? Isn't there something, you ever heard that saying, going to the witch doctor?
It's almost what Chillingworth is here, right? A witch doctor of sorts in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
I pose this question, you guys. Hawthorne is clear here that Chillingworth actually does keep Dimmesdale maybe has like a heart problem or something, right? Hawthorne goes into detail saying that Chillingworth actually does keep him alive, right? He actually does provide him medical care to keep his body going. So the question is here is what does Chillingworth do wrong to Dimmesdale? Like where does, especially when it comes to like medical ethics, where does he go too far with it?
I think where he was wrong was keeping him alive, because he kept him alive all those years to make him suffer. And that was really, in a sense, kind of his revenge was making him live knowing with that guilt.
And he wanted him to admit the secret.
Right.
Yeah, he was obsessed
But
with it almost.
yeah.
One of the interesting literary motifs in the story is actually Chillingworth's cold glare that he gives. Like, I don't know if you guys picked up on that, but lots of times in the story, we'll get passages talking about his cold glare, right? That's almost like a dissecting glare, right? His glare is so piercing, like that he can like see underneath into your heart. Right? He keeps giving Dimsdale that glare, right? So imagine like always, imagine your doctor. Hawthorne says here, right? There's nothing worse than having an intimate, you can't keep a secret from your doctor, right? He says that at some point here, right? I guess a lot of where we start going wrong is doctors should have some type of remove from their patients. They shouldn't be this close to their patients, right? I guess that's probably a safe assumption to make. I mean, think about it today. Like if you go to the doctor, let's say you go to a specialist, let's say you go to a knee surgeon or something. Well, if you go to like WVU Madison, go to see a knee surgeon, you might see the doctor all 30 seconds at your appointment, right? The rest of the time you're with a nurse or nurse practitioner, or the interns or whatever, right? So even think about it now, you don't really have an intimate relationship with your doctor. I think that's by design, right? Because there's a danger here as far as becoming too close with your patients. If you guys have any thoughts on that subject.
I agree. There's a few people on earth you don't want to have a grudge against you, and your doctor's one of them. I think.
Right.
And he couldn't just go to another doctor. I mean, that's like you said, that's all he had, and yeah.
Yeah, think about like a psychologist, right? Like, what if a psychologist took like an obsessive interest in their patient, right? That could be bad. That could be bad. So what point in the story you guys think he finally turned into like a goblin, right? A little urchin, right? That skulking through the woods. Right? Where do you think that might have happened here? When he started doing this to Dimsdale, maybe, or maybe after a while, like when Lisa said earlier, like he kept him alive, even though he probably shouldn't be.
I think he started whenever he actually kind of started connecting the dots that Dimsdale was the father.
Right. He ups the ante a little bit there. Right? He even like moves in with him, right? Which is kind of weird.
Yeah, I feel like it gets worse over the course, just the course of the whole story. I think a lot of it too, like how Dimsdale his health was getting bad because of his kept secrets or whatever, his sin he was living with. I feel like it was kind of similar with Chillingworth. Like the more time went on with it, the more gremlin like he became.
More the sin sort of evolved into something even worse the further you go. Yeah, that theme of guilt, right? How guilt twists people into becoming like monsters, right? I think that's definitely something prominent here. Well, Hester faces the guilt every day. Right? She's perhaps the most liberated one here, and Dimsdale holds it in, pretty much dies after he lets it out a secret. He's so.
Chillingworth's the one that couldn't handle the guilt. Hester, now she kept it in, and Dimsdale, he didn't mind at first, and Chillingworth just took it out on everybody.
I feel
Right.
like Chillingworth knew, like he had his suspicions, but I think when he really started to put, I guess, what you say, two and two together, is when he seen him looking out the window, and they were down there at the grave, and Pearl and him was, kind of like playing through the window a little bit. I think that's when he really started getting more, kind of obsessive to the point.
That's a very dramatic part of the book because it's during this meteor storm, right? So like the meteor storm almost like represents Chillingworth's emotions there, right? At seeing that.
Well, didn't
That's
he
that,
say,
that's that. I was gonna say that's probably my favorite chapter of the whole thing. I think it's really dramatic.
didn't he tell Hester though, whenever she first seen him, that he would know, that he would watch, and he would know, and he would figure it out, and he would basically make him pay.
Right, from the very beginning.
Yes, from the very beginning. And I think that he felt through the exchange when she was up there that there could be something. And he just made it an obsessive compulsive to get revenge slowly.
Let's transition over to talking more about Hester here. I'm especially interested to know what you guys have to say about the letter, the symbol of the letter. Right. We got to talk about gender here, gender politics here a little bit too, right? The Scarlet Letter is a timeless book, partially because women are held to a higher standard than men when it comes to a lot of things, right? So it's hard to argue that certain types of scarlet letters still don't exist with women today, the way that women are held to higher standards and stuff. So I'm interested to know what you guys have to say about that subject, even how scarlet letters are still kind of symbols today, so to speak.
They are, absolutely, and a lot of times I think that it's perpetuated onto victims of sexual crimes and things like that. Like, well, she shouldn't have wore that, and she shouldn't have texted back, and things like that. And especially like if it's a younger person and an older person, and so it gets kind of infuriating to me, because especially if they're young and it's an older person texting them and doing these things to them and stuff like that, because when you're young, you don't have the mental capacity to understand that you're being groomed. But yet when things come out, people are putting that victim down in public and putting that scarlet letter on her when it's not her fault.
You're exactly right. Exactly. And that's hard to deal with, because we teach I got two daughters, and we teach them to be strong and stuff like that. But if, something like that would happen, it's not right that the girl would have to really spend the rest of her life trying to get away from something that really was not her fault. And they say, well, you have control. Well, I'm like Lisa, when they're so young, a lot of times they're looking for a father figure, or a lot of times they just like that, well, the peer pressure, and they just like, feeling like they're loved or something. There could be all kinds of different ways, but yeah, I think we do. We put that scarlet letter upon certain people.
Kind of looked at it like she had the A, so she was automatically like judged by a lot of people, until over time it just seems like she was over time it had changed shape, but it seemed like people kind of gotten over it or whatever. They kind of, I feel like, you know, a lot of people almost even like forgave her for what had happened or whatever. And it just makes me think, you know, I'll give like, you know, it's like stereotyping in general, like, I don't know, politics, for example, like, you know, say he's, you know, you just think, well, he's liberal, well, he's conservative or whatever. And you automatically, like, some people automatically think they know like everything about you, like based on that, that label or whatever. But, you know, once you get to know somebody, that, feel like that kind of fades away like that.
I felt like too, whether she had that scarlet letter or not, she still was going to be stuck with it because she had Pearl. And you know, that happens a lot in our society, you know, just in this same case. You know, more than likely the woman is stuck with the child and the dad just walks off, or the man just walks off. You know, you're still really stuck with that.
She didn't even I think she had the option to remove it, and she didn't even, I guess she just owns it, I guess.
I think too that could be in like a stubbornness too.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to, you want me to wear it? I'm going to wear it. I'm going to show you that I'm above it. You know,
And
something
she even
like
talks,
that.
yeah, she even talks about raising Pearl and say, you know, they was going to take her away from her. And then she was like, well, no, she's going to learn best from me. She's going to learn from this, this letter. And
That chapter gave me a lot of anxiety because I hadn't never like watched all of the movie or anything like that. I was I downloaded the book on Audible and I kind of followed along with it while I was listening to it because I couldn't make sense of it reading it myself. But my husband was sitting in the living room listening to it with me, and he was like, "They're not taking her, are they?" And he was getting emotional. I'm like, "They better not."
I think it goes to show love of a mother too. You know, you own up to your, you know, I'm not going to say mistakes because I don't look at them that way. You know, I had my oldest one is 26. I had her when I was 17 years old. I was still young, you know, and I remember going, I was in 12th grade. I remember going to school and being made fun of because at this time, you know, 20 some years ago, it was still kind of the, oh my God, you know, and so I kind of realized what this is, you know, what it feels like to have everybody's eyes upon you. And it's just like you've never done anything wrong in your life, but you get caught up in this and you're just like the worst person ever. But I can tell you that, you know, I wasn't. And I took care of my kid and I raised my kid and, you know, me and her dad together. And she's turned out to be a wonderful mother. Now I got a grandbaby, you know, from her. So, you know, you can't always let that stain you. But I can relate to her in a way.
And you know, that happened to a friend of mine in high school. She got pregnant when she was in high school. And my parents would not let me harm her anymore. For just like how them other people treated Pearl like an outcast, whatever. It's like I couldn't be associated with her anymore. And I just thought that was terrible. But you know, I think my parents was just trying to shelter me to keep me from something like that happening to me. You know what I'm saying? But I do remember that, and I feel you on that.
Like, you know, it was scared enough to tell your mom and dad anyway, which, you know, let's just be honest, I didn't. My mom had to find out. But, you know,
I was married,
yeah,
some years old, and I had to tell my
yeah, you know, I had but it was just like, you know, you have all these friends and everything. I have to say that my friends still stayed with me I had some really good friends, but what made it harder on me, like my husband was a year older than me, he was already out of school. He didn't have to put up with the looks and the stares and the stereotype and, just needing somebody to talk to, and then, still having to go through that, and you're sick as a dog, and it was just bad. But, it really, it doesn't define who you are, but it really makes who you came out to be. And I really, my goal through life was I was going to finish school, and I finished, and I was with honors, and, that was something I was really proud of. But I knew, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without my parents, but I knew that I was going to raise her, and I was going to take care of her, and I was going to teach her, just like Hester, I don't want her to have to go through this, because it's rewarding to have kids, but it is so hard at that age.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank God both my kids, one still doesn't have one. And, I want them to be settled in their life before that happens, but I don't look at them as mistakes.
I can see where that would especially come in this area that we're in, right? Just because this is such a religious area, right? Where someone gets pregnant at that kind of age, right? That scarlet letter stigma comes on them.
It makes you a strong person, that's for sure.
I had a cousin that she got pregnant with her first when she's 15 and her second when she's 17. And her parents made her get married. Like it was 1953. And her and this guy, they didn't really love each other. I mean, I think eventually they kind of fell in love with each other because they're still together. But they didn't love each other, and they were just two scared kids being forced to stand up there. And I was dead against that wedding. I didn't want no part of it. And it was just a big stigma. And I can remember when my Uncle Jack told my mom all about it. And my Uncle Jack was born out of wedlock. And then I had like 2 or 3 aunts that were pregnant on their wedding day. And my mama said, well, you know what? It ain't the first Lucas to get pregnant in high school, and it ain't going to be the last one. But they just made such a big deal out of it. And, oh, she had to get married before she started showing. And I'm like, y'all, it's done. It ain't going to go away. And forcing her to marry somebody that she doesn't love ain't going to make it no better. And I think that's a lot of like what you were talking about, like the Christian side of it, and it's usually like the stricter ones, like the real long hair and the skirts only and stuff like that. They freak out and they're like, oh, we got to make this look like you were married first, and that's a lie. And there ain't no big sin and no little sin. The liar is going to be down there with the murderer. So,
well, I'll tell you this, and then I'll go on. My great grandfather was a pastor of Untitled Church, and my great grandma, when she found out that I was pregnant, because back in their time, when if a woman got pregnant and out of wedlock, you sent them off. And I remember when she looked at my mom and she said, "Don't you have some family up in Ohio that she can go stay with?" And and my mom's like, "Yeah, I do, but that ain't gonna happen." And that was back in 1993. But she was still living on the way she was raised and what they done in their time, So I can only imagine how those women felt being treated like that, that your whole family would discard you and get rid of you.
And like you said, back to the gender thing, it's always the woman or the girl. The guys, like half the time, there's no whatever judgment or whatever hardly on. Nobody ever really even says anything, brings him up again.
So would we even have a book if Dimsdale would have come out and admitted it in the beginning?
No.
No,
But I feel like he was begging for like it without telling. He was like begging people to find out. I feel like because like as it went on, his sermons were basically about him and him getting up on the scaffold himself. I feel like he was just wanting people to find out without him actually saying it.
But he wouldn't have to actually confess it, or be the one to first say it. Yeah, I feel that same way.
And I feel like in a way, would he would have ended up living in the long term if Hester would have just went ahead and snitched on him and from the beginning, would
Would
they
they
have
have
just ran
believed
away
her though?
together? Maybe not.
That's true.
What'd you say, Sydney? I missed that.
I asked if they would have believed her if she would have snitched.
Yeah, because
Right.
her
If he didn't admit it, they probably wouldn't have.
Mm-mm.
her credibility was already shot, right? So,
Yeah.
she would have accused a high member of the community, right? That would have been
Probably made it worse on her.
right. She probably
I also
realized
felt,
it.
I also felt like he was at the point, especially later. Like if someone would have spilled the beans, I felt like he would have, was just looking for some kind of relief. I don't feel like he would have come in the beginning, but I felt like later on, if he was so torn up in himself that he would have probably admitted it. I feel.
What's the worst that could have happened if he would have admitted it? Right. That's where the double standard thing starts to come in, right? If you look at colonial American history of this time, it's always the women who get like outcasted. Even like I told you guys the story of the founding of Rhode Island, right? Rhode Island became a colony because they kicked a woman out who went against their ideas, right? So Anne Hutchinson, Roger Williams was Rhode Island. Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry. I was wondering, because I'm not for sure if it was ever really clear when they were wanting her to tell who it was. Were they going to punish him, or is it going to be like today, high five and attaboy? Or you know what I mean?
Mhm.
He would have been looked
Was
down
he-
on, but would they have like done all the stuff to him? Right.
I mean, I guarantee you, he wouldn't have had to walk around with an A emblazoned on his chest for the rest of his life.
Right. Would he have had to go up there and stand with that up there on him, the letter on him, and would he have been able to get back into the pulpit just because he said he repented?
I don't think anything
forgave
would
him.
have changed.
No, me too, Sydney. I think that nothing would have really changed with him.
Well, he was
Because
so highly looked upon by society. If he would have admitted it, or if they would have found out and started pointing fingers, nobody would have believed it anyway. Or nobody would want to believe it.
Right. Nobody'd want to believe it.
true.
Yeah, you're right. It seemed like they were like, yeah, he was trying to almost tell on himself, and people were just like, kind of just didn't catch it.
Didn't catch it or didn't want to catch it.
Right.
I want to segue over to one more talking point, and that's the Puritan stuff in the novel, right? Just how Hawthorne depicts the Puritans and like how intolerant they are and things like that. I'm curious to know what your guys' thoughts are. Now that we've got a fictionalized view of what we studied earlier in the course, I'm interested to see what you guys think about that. Do you think he was overcritical of the Puritans? Do you think that he depicted them fairly? Was he? Because remember, his great grandparent or whatever was part of this colony that did a lot of these things. I also ask you the question too: does the novel take a stance on religion and government being one and the same? Does it take a chance on? Does this novel take a stance on separating church and state?
Yeah,
I think that it
so.
was a kind of an accurate portrayal. I mean, like just based upon the Salem witch trials and stuff like, and how they just overreacted about different things. Kind of makes it feel like it was an accurate representation. I mean, he may have embellished some things, but they weren't, it didn't seem like they were overly cruel to her. It was mostly they just ignored her existence until they needed cloth, or you know what I mean, like a death robe or something like that. Then they could use her, but up until then, it was just they didn't care.
Yeah, I think his story kind of says everyone, you know, everyone sins, I guess, and Hester's really, well, I guess they all got punished for their sins in a way, and in some sins.
I know in one of the early chapters, when Hester goes to talk to the governor or whatever, Hawthorne's narrator's like, kind of like, how ridiculous is it that the governor would be overseeing like this case that like a social worker would be looking at today, right? How ridiculous is it that that's in the governor's hands, right?
Right. That's what I was going to point out and say, that she went to the governor, and even the governor even had like just as much the same as up there at authority as like a minister. Do you know what I'm saying? Like they were like on one level, like joined together. Like if the church didn't find her worthy, then neither was the governor. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
One and the same, right?
right. He treated her just as bad.
Yeah, I think the book definitely showcases the dangers of conflating religion with state. I think, like we talked about that in the Enlightenment period, about how Jefferson and Franklin were both opposed to the combination of the two, right? I think this book definitely illustrates the dangers of combining church and state, right? Even if we think about governments today, like a lot of the Islamic countries today are still theocracies, right? Those aren't the best places to live, right? To say
Sharia law,
right? And for a long time, England was pretty much a theocracy, right? They battled over what type of Christianity was going to reign supreme over there. Wars have been emerged from it, like the English Civil War. It's interesting that this theme comes up in 1800s America, dangers between separation of church and state. It seems like more of a 1800s America kind of theme, but it definitely is prominent here. There's a few other minor things in this book. I don't know if you guys noticed, but early on they talked about an indentured servant who was. So you got a picture of an indentured slave early in the book, right? So that was a nice historical characterization you got, because in the colonial days, like I told you guys before, slavery just wasn't because of skin color. Like oftentimes people would come in, work 7 years as a slave, and then they would be granted free of their debt, and like they would get a piece of land out of it, right? So they were slaves for a number of years in like a contract kind of thing. So you saw that early in the book. So this is a great. One more question I want to ask you guys: what do you guys think of the first chapter, the customs house, right? What do you guys think? Because that's Hawthorne as himself as the narrator talking about like why he decided to write the story and stuff. And you guys have any thoughts on that chapter? You guys probably started this book and thought, okay, what's this? Right.
That was my reaction of, this is the most random thing I've ever read in my life.
One thing to note, I told you guys last week, this is when authorship was, like I told you, Poe was an author who made a living being an author. Hawthorne didn't, right? He made a living he was like a government bureaucrat. He worked at this customs house, right, which was it's pretty much this about as mid-level government bureaucracy as it gets, right? He talks about like how he was a Whig. There was two parties in antebellum America: the Democrats and the Whigs. The Whigs would later turn into Republicans, but he was a Whig. So he even talks about like how from one presidential administration to another, he got cleaned out. Right? When the Democrats took back over, he lost his job, right? So, but he discovers this document in the customs house with the Scarlet Letter, right? That's what causes him to write the story. He does an interesting job painting a picture of like the corruption inside like bureaucratic places and like the types of people that work there, like the old men who've been there like 50 years, right? He does a good job painting a picture of that type of environment, I think. That was my reaction the first time I read it too. I was like, what's this?
Actually, that's what I did. I only read a couple of pages and was like, what in the world is this? So I just skipped on over. I didn't even finish reading it. I went on to where it said 1, the prison door.
Yeah,
That's what I did because
read
I
all-
was afraid that, like, because I was afraid, well, maybe this is like another story. So I just skipped on and went.
That's what I did. I started it and I thought, so I just skipped.
Now that you guys have finished the whole thing, now is actually a good time to read that part, because now
Go back and read it.
and now you'll see like his reason for his project and all that type of stuff. It's almost better as an afterword than a preface, I think.
Is he better about like the big words in this part of it?
No,
Bless his heart. Oh God.
I just now see 1.
Is it just almost like an author's note, like at the beginning of the story? Like he
Pretty
even
much.
talks about former coworkers being lazy and old, and an inspector called him an animal.
Pretty much. That's pretty much what it is. Yes, it gives you a nice insight into his mind, I guess, while he was writing it. I think that's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Something that you often don't get with writers. Right? You don't know what they were thinking when they wrote it. Sometimes it's good to know that, or what inspired their story, or something like that. That's kind of what the customs house part is.
You know, that's kind of something that I wonder a lot of times when I read a book is, especially like the more out there topics, like where did that inspiration come from? I mean, I know like George Lucas said that he had the idea for Star Wars in junior high. And like, did he just randomly one day just pop up and think about Darth Vader? I mean, where does that inspiration come from? Do you see something and it makes that story come, or you know what I mean?
I can answer the question about George Lucas. He read a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell, the famous mythologist. And that book is what helped inspire Star Wars. So, fun fact.
Wow, thank you.
Fun fact for you. If you think Hawthorne uses a lot of big words, read A Hero with a Thousand Faces.
It amazes me how these guys, like hundreds, several hundred years ago, have this kind of, vocabulary in their arsenal. Like, how do they,
Yeah, in a way, it was a much more literate age than today, right? In many ways.
I guess you had to rely more on writing, I guess.
Yeah, they didn't. I mean, reading was a big form of entertainment then.
Yeah.
Right?
You didn't have movies or nothing like that.
Was there anything else you guys want to discuss? Or are you ready to call it? I feel like we've covered all the bases. So good discussion. I'm glad you guys, even though Hawthorne's tough, I'm glad you guys plowed your way through it. Now you have an appreciation for him. Like I'm getting that impression here. All right, so like I said, he's no one's favorite read, but he's a very rewarding read if you get through him.
I found myself while I was reading along with the narrator on Audible, in which Tasha gave me that idea because I told her I was trying to listen to it on Audible. I said, and I swear I think it's worse listening to it than trying to read it. And she said, do both. That's what I've been doing.
That's what works for me. That's really about the only way I can do it. I do it, with every one of them.
Yeah, that's
those
like,
Audibles put me to sleep. I cannot, even if I read it. Nope.
I highly encourage that, guys. I mean, read the Audible or listen to those. Even though, like, if you're getting to a story and your mind starts like going in 10 different ways, like go back and reread like the Spark Notes or something to make sure that you comprehended. Don't use Spark Notes as a place for reading, right? But use them to double check your comprehension. I think that's a good thing to do.
I use that when I don't understand certain paragraphs.
Right.
Just go and read that, and it'll explain it.
That's what that's supposed to be there for, to help you with your reading, and not as a substitute for the reading, but to help you with it. So
yeah, it always brings things. And it always brings things I didn't catch, I guess, some like symbolism and some themes and things.
I'll never tell you not to use it because it's a very helpful tool.
I don't know, some like the analysis sometimes where it gives you like the themes and it compares certain things in it. I don't read that part because I like to try and figure that out for myself. I just
a lot of those analyses, they're like subjective anyways. Like, you could have a totally different opinion.
Where are you finding those? My book don't have those.
It's online.
Spark Notes, it's a website.
Yeah, like you can Google like Spark Notes, the Scarlet Letter, and it gives you like a chapter by chapter synopsis.
Really?
Yeah.
Why didn't you know that?
You've never used Spark Notes?
Oh my God, I relied heavily on Spark Notes in English class.
No. All right, I'm gonna have to write this down.
So to give you guys a preview for what's coming up on Friday, you're going to read a short story by William Gilmore Simms called "The Grayling" or "Murder Will Out." Right, so it's a great like ghost story, murder mystery type of story. You don't have to read that one on the computer online. I'm giving you a PDF of it because it's not in the book. The reason why it's not in the book is you just simply don't see any Southern writers who lived in the South in these textbooks. You just don't. Poe's probably the only exception. Like, you just don't see it.
They got that letter on.
They got the letter, right?
Yeah.
Right.
The slavery letter, right? So Simms was a very pro-slavery writer during his life. He was from South Carolina. But during his lifetime, he sold more books than any of these guys that we've read, Poe, Hawthorne, any of them. Like, he was a sensation then. Now only a certain niche group of scholars actually read him.
And there is a discussion for that this week, right?
Yeah, that'll be for Friday, right? So that'll be.
Okay.
I was originally going to do that discussion with you guys last week, but since I wanted to give you time to read the Scarlet Letter, I moved it to this week instead. So, and next week, for next Tuesday, you're going to be reading 2 longer stories by Herman Melville. One's called Bartleby the Scrivener. The other one's called Benito Sereno. Okay, Bartleby Melville's an interesting read too. He's kind of he's very rewarding too. He's kind of like Hawthorne in that way. Hawthorne was actually like his role model. He kind of like worshiped the ground Hawthorne walked on. But Bartleby's a really funny story about this guy who decides one day, hey, I'm just going to stop working at the law office. I'm going to see what people do about it. That's pretty much what Bartleby is.
Oh wow, we all just had that
Yeah.
fantasy.
Yeah, he says when he gets an order, he says I would prefer not to. Right? And it just causes all kinds of chaos. So I'll be interested to hear what you guys have to say about that one. Benito Cereno that's a short story about this slave ship that gets taken over. So it's the same guy who wrote Moby Dick, Herman Melville. That's who we're reading next time. Go ahead, Danny.
And I've heard his name a million times, and can't say I've ever read anything by him. And I knew he wrote Moby Dick. I've known that since I was young, but I've never read anything.
Yeah, but Bartleby's his most famous short story. So, it's a great writer. If it was up to me, I would teach Moby Dick. But if I taught Moby Dick, that would be the only thing we'd read the whole summer because it's so long. So. Right, so.
I mentioned something to one of the credit recovery kids last week, and I said something about they said something about that story about a whale. I said Moby Dick. And they said who? And these kids don't even know who that is anymore. And it was just, I don't know. I think it was that little narwhal in the Elf movie or something, but like they had never heard of Herman Melville, Moby Dick, Captain Ishmael, nobody. I was like, kids, no wonder.
Yeah, it makes you shake
I've
your head
never read it.
sometimes.
And they said that accelerated reader program at school will do kids good. I tell you what, that burned me up having to deal with that with my kids. And look what you're dealing with today. It didn't do them any good.
Hey, if you watch SpongeBob, you can take all them accelerated reader tests and get the points that you're required to have.
Yeah, if you guys ever watched the Archer cartoon show, it makes a Bartleby joke. It's good. It's good stories. They're longer stories, but you could probably call them a novella, which is like a shorter novel, right? It's kind of that form. So that's what's up for next time. So read Bartleby first. Though Bartleby's a good time. All right. So without further ado, we'll see you guys next week. If you want to start writing the papers or something, just hit me up if you have questions or if you want to talk about anything else. All right.
You have a good evening.
All right. Yep. Good night.
All right.
Bye.